The Seattle Storm are sending Jewell Loyd to the Las Vegas Aces in a blockbuster three-team trade that moves Kelsey Plum to the LA Sparks. That's according to ESPN. As part of the deal, Seattle receives the second pick in this year's WNBA draft from LA in exchange for the Storm's number 9 pick, while the Aces also receive the 13th pick, a second-round selection from the Sparks. Is a 6-time All-Star and 2-time champ with Seattle, while Plum is a 3-time All-Star with 2 titles of her own out in Las Vegas. Loyd to Vegas, Plum to LA. Just how does this maybe impact the landscape of the Western Conference? And I kind of want to also throw in the league as a whole, getting some of these big pieces now in new places.
The Seattle Storm are sending Jewell Loyd to the Las Vegas Aces in a blockbuster 3-team trade that moves Kelsey Plum to the LA Sparks. That's according to ESPN. As part of the deal, Seattle receives the second pick in this year's WNBA draft from LA in exchange for the Storm's number 9 pick. While the Aces also received the 13th pick, a second-round selection from the Sparks. Looks like what happens in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas. Just ask Kelsey Plum, who's leaving the bright lights of Sin City for the star-studded streets of Los Angeles. But hey, at least she won't have to deal with AJaWilson's ego anymore, right? Loyd is a 6-time All-Star and 2-time champ with Seattle, while Plum is a 3-time All-Star with 2 titles of her own out in Las Vegas. In a shocking turn of events, the star guard has been traded to the LA Sparks in a 3-team deal that sent shockwaves through the WNBA. But this isn't just about one player leaving, it's about the unraveling of the Las Vegas Aces. We witnessing the fall of an empire, and who's really to blame for this? Are you ready? Let's go with Loyd to Vegas, Plum to LA. Just how does this maybe impact the landscape of the Western Conference? And I kind of want to also throw in the league as a whole, getting some of these big pieces now in new places. Picture this: you're scrolling through your phone minding your own business when suddenly bam, the news hits you like a fast break. Kelsey Plum, the sharpshooter extraordinaire, is leaving the Las Vegas Aces. But wait, there's more. She's not just leaving, she's been traded to the LA Sparks in a blockbuster 3-team deal that's got the entire WNBA buzzing. Well, we have been hearing for a little while the reporting of Annie Costel at the Chicago Sun-Times, as well as HTA Rodriguez with Beta Basket. We've been hearing that JELYD, especially after the investigation with the Seattle Storm, was likely on the move. And then of course Kelsey Plum was said by the Aces, though she was considered and still is technically considered one of the top draws in free agency as an unrestricted free agent. Let's break this down, because it's not just any old trade. This is the kind of move that sends shockwaves through the league. Plum to the Sparks, Jewell Loyd to the Aces, and the Sparks' coveted number 2 draft pick to the Storm. It's like a high-stakes game of musical chairs, but with superstars as the players. When you have 2 names like that, 2 Olympians, just 1 gold in Paris, they are going to, as you said, draw a lot of assets. And when you see a 3-team trade, obviously this was about as many teams as possible, but especially the Seattle Storm and the Las Vegas Aces being able to get value. Now you might be scratching your head wondering why the Aces would let go of a talent like Plum. Well, that's the million-dollar question that's got everyone talking. Remember those whispers about tension between Plum and AJaWilson? Looks like there might have been some fire behind that smoke. After all, PA reminds me a lot of you, like say you're not really about me. She knows how her relationship gotten her to that point, and also like she's good at basketball, but like she understands her privilege if like pushes her over the top. Innocent. It reminds me a lot of you, and I think and I mean that's a but. Here's where it gets really interesting. Plum isn't just looking for a quick change of scenery. Reports are saying she's eyeing a long-term stay with the Sparks, possibly beyond the 2025 season. It's like she's not just changing teams, she's changing her entire career trajectory. I think what we have seen in the WNBA, especially with the last collective bargaining agreement that the league is still under the negotiating right now, we've seen a lot more player autonomy and movement. And that makes things really exciting. And the Aces, they're not just swapping one star for another by bringing in Loyd, they're adding yet another piece to their championship puzzle. But is it the right piece? That's the question on everyone's minds. Loyd's joining a team that's been absolutely dominant, snagging back-to-back championships in 2022 and 2023, but will her style mesh with AJaWilson and the rest of the Aces' star-studded lineup? Want to go back to the Aces just very briefly, because you talked about how they were trying to get that 3-peat, but instead now maybe seeking to compete for their 3rd championship in the last 4 years, and certainly looking to build that core around AJaWilson. But just what does Jewell Loyd kind of add to now what the Aces are trying to build here? Some analysts are raising eyebrows at the Aces' decision. Plum and Loyd might have similar skill sets, But there are whispers about Lloyd's recent shooting performance. Is this a case of the Aces being too confident in their ability to make any player fit their system? Lloyd again has a very similar skill set in a lot of ways to Kelsey Plum. I think about players that can play that number 2 guard in particular, maybe have the ball in their hands a time or two, but with Jewell Loyd her execution from the corner is lethal, and with Jewell Loyd we saw that even at the Olympics, there was some controversy there with how she was utilized, or in fact how she was not utilized by head coach Cheryl Ree for Team USA, and then again, there were a few things going on with Seattle, and we saw a little bit of her productivity and specifically her efficiency dip, but let's not forget about the sparks in all this. They're not just getting a disgruntled star, they're getting a motivated one. Plum's looking for a fresh start, and La might just be the perfect place for her to reignite her career. Could this be the move that finally puts the Sparks back in playoff contention after a disappointing season? A lot of people thought they could be in contention to over and usurp the Houston Comets for that feat. Of course that didn't come to pass. The New York Liberty are champions. Let's not forget, but I think it's just a little bit of a different culture change, and I think with that it means that Kelsey Plum, if she does go to law, will be utilized for some of her experience and her leadership. Alright, let's talk about the domino effect of this trade. You thought it was just about Plum, Lloyd, and a draft pick. Think again. This move is reshaping the entire WNBA landscape, and we're about to see some serious shock waves. She will be paired alongside last year's number 2 overall pick, Cameron Brink, who was off to a fantastic rookie year before that season-ending injury. I mean, that's a 3-time All-Star. We talk about 2 titles, but just looking at her joining that, what kind of expertise, what kind of knowledge, what can that really do for, I don't want to use this, but what kind of spark can that be for the Sparks out there in LA? I had to use a picture. The LA Sparks, who were stuck in the basement last season, just catapulted themselves into the spotlight. They've got Kelsey Plum now, and she's not just any player. We're talking about a sharpshooter who's been itching to be the main star, and guess what? In law, she's got her chance. I think you're right with Cameron Brink coming back, hopefully very healthy from injury. As you mentioned, she was a dynamic force for that law team. I think it's the overall organization and some of the things again that this is a legacy franchise. The Los Angeles Sparks played in the first ever WNBA basketball game, and again we've seen other teams just build a little bit more infrastructure around their players, but here's where it gets interesting. The Sparks didn't just gain a star, they gave up their golden ticket, that number 2 draft pick. It could have been their chance to snag a generational talent like Olivia Miles or Paige Beckers. We're talking about the kind of players that change franchises overnight. But the Sparks are betting on the here and now, rolling the dice on Plum star power. Heard a Tim or two the phrase hybrid rebuild come into play. They have a new coach. They are going to have now, as if this has been reported, a new player in Kelsey Plum. So I think the leadership from Plum, and I think maybe the reset for Kelsey Plum, being in a new environment, maybe taking on a different role, because she's coming from the Las Vegas Aces. Now let's talk about the Aces. They swapped Plum for Lloyd, and on paper it looks like a fair trade, but dig a little deeper and you'll see the cracks. Lloyd's coming off a season where her shot wasn't falling like it used to. Her shot quality, a measly 36% compared to Plum's 43%. That's not just a small dip, it's a canyon-sized gap. She was on the Olympic team, of course, has been with the Aces for some years. She just had her jersey retired by her alma mater in Washington. So there's a lot of great things, and I do want to say I was in Paris for the Summer Olympics, and we got to speak to Kelsey Plum. She had a few things off the court going on, and she talked about just leaning into her faith and being so blessed, and just kind of almost laughing at all of the things that were going on outside of basketball. But that's not all. The Aces might have just messed with their secret sauce. Plum wasn't just a scorer, she was a playmaker. She made everyone around her better. Now they've got a pure scorer in Lloyd, but who's going to set up those easy buckets? The Aces' offensive chemistry could be in for a rough ride, especially when you have Wilson that demands the ball all the time. And then there's the Seattle Storm. They're sitting pretty with that number 2 pick, grinning like they'd just hit the jackpot. And you know what they might have? This could be the start of a whole new era in Seattle. Imagine Paige Beckers in a Storm jersey. That's the kind of player you build a franchise around, like the Las Vegas Aces, who they have a few moving pieces and moving parts. You can't always keep a championship team together. Here's the reality: this trade